So, hi, and welcome to the Law Life Coach podcast. We're here celebrating innovators who are making the law a healthier and happier place to practice. And joining us today is John Iino, the Chief Diversity Officer at Reed Smith. John, if you Google his name, has countless awards. Thank you so much for joining us, John, by the way.
Oh, absolutely. It's a pleasure.
And you've got all these amazing metrics that you've helped to change, increasing the number of women, increasing the diversity. But I think the metric that's the most interesting to me is the fact that you've decreased the attrition rate of diversity lawyers from 21 to 11%. It's one thing to attract talent. It's a whole nother thing to retain talent. Can you talk just a little bit about some of the practices that you've put in place to create that kind of a culture?
Wow. Well, thanks. First of all, thanks for having me on the podcast. It's great to be able to share. A big part at Reed Smith that the philosophy that I have or we have is that we really want to share our best practices, share what people are doing in this space. I appreciate that a little bit. People can tendency to be thinking that this is proprietary. Do I really want to share our trade secrets? But I kind of taken our approach has really been taking a completely opposite view. This isn't like we're working with competitors. The other law firms aren't really competitors. We're all in this endeavor together. So, whether we're part of organizations or speaking on panels and all the rest, I'm always happy to share what we're doing and help it inspires others to go back to their management and say, yes, see, this is something that we need to do. And inspired by competition, frankly, because they might say, hey, Reed Smith is doing this. Maybe we should be doing it as well. But it's really a philosophy that we have. And for that reason, we publish an annual report. That's online. We distribute it. We hope as many people as possible will read it and be inspired by some of the things we're doing. And frankly, don't hold back in terms of discussing the things that we are doing. Happy to share. So with that long introduction, Brooke, in terms of reducing attrition, yeah, you're absolutely right that it's easy or not. It's easier to recruit diverse talent. The real hard work is how do you keep them there. So there's no one magic bullet. There's not one program that works. It's just a combination of a lot of things that go into that. So, I can start first of all, just from the top in terms of how we started it and then how we started some of the programs we've gone through.
Sounds like a good place to start.
So the first thing we did literally was create scorecards and try to gather that data. When I came in 3.5 years ago or so into this role, I started asking the questions. Okay, so what percentage of our organization is women or diverse, and how many Black African Americans do we have? How many LGBT individuals do we have? And it was a really tough effort to get that data. So, that was a big push to say, look, we need to have this data. We need to have it in real time. We can pull it at any time. And beyond that, I want to start sharing it with our leadership. So one of the first things we did was to create these scorecards or dashboards that we circulate to, not only the senior leadership, but every, office managing partner, every practice group leader gets that data. And over time, we discovered what works in terms of presenting that data. So as you can imagine with dashboards and the like, you have to have very digestible data that people can look at it in quickly. But we managed to make it now quarterly and literally ranking the offices and ranking the groups. And that lawyers are A-type personalities and they never like to finish last or look bad in front of their peers. And so what I do on a quarterly basis is I publish that diversity rankings showing the progress, both the current snapshot as well as trends. So year over year, progress or lack of progress, and ranking every one of our practice groups and in our offices, or at least in the U.S., our offices. And this is also, we were fortunate that at around the same time, our management bonus plan came out. And historically, bonuses were very just discretionary. but we put a lot of thought in terms of the metrics that would go around in terms of awarding bonuses to management. And so, whether you're entitled to a 50%, a 75%, or 100% of the bonus, dependent upon meeting a lot of the metrics. And fortunately, one of the metrics is your performance in terms of diversity inclusion. And before, you would see, I'm sure many organizations and law firms have, self-evaluations. And so the first achievement was to have, what have you done to contribute to diversity inclusion and advance our diversity inclusion efforts, as a question. But it was always a very open-ended question for people in management. Now, not only could you say, well, I'm committed to this, I help people, blah, blah, blah. We can actually point to your metrics and seeing how you've actually progressed, and measuring not only the recruiting, like you're saying, measuring not only your current headcount, but measuring the attrition and promotion. So, getting leadership involved in that on that level, I think, was one of the first things that we did. There's a lot more there, and so just depending on how much time you have, there's a lot of programs that you'd want to put in place to make sure that people feel engaged, feel part of something, feel like there's hope for you at the law firm.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. Gathering the data as a first step, and then making it matter in terms of, having a stake in the game for a lot of these leaders. I think that makes a lot of sense as a place to start, especially at a larger law firm. Now, in addition, we have a lot of boutique law firms that are interested in, attracting diverse talent and also retaining that talent. They might not have someone like you in a position that's focused exclusively on diversity, but would you have any tips or advice for somebody at a smaller firm, a leader that wants to encourage inclusion and diversity, and kind of create a culture that allows for people to stay?
Well, you hit it on the head in terms of culture, because ultimately, why do people want to be in law firms? Why do they stay in law firms? A number of reasons. Obviously, compensation. Getting paid obviously helps. The fact that the ability to get promoted. People really want to know that there's the opportunity to advance. And having a culture where people feel comfortable with where they are, or feel included or valued. So when you talk about all three of those aspects, it's whether it's a large firm or a small firm, culture is very important. And so if you have a culture where people really don't feel like they can show up and be themselves and express themselves, in a positive way that is be their authentic selves, is very important. So we certainly try to stress the importance of diversity, meaning everyone's diversity, no matter what your background, you're welcome. So that that's certainly the important part of culture. The ability to feel like you have a future there. That's why it's so important for role models and for people in more senior roles to emulate the kind of behavior and saying, okay, this is something the kind of behavior we want to see. And as you would start to promote, say, more women or diverse individuals to, higher positions or to leadership positions, or grooming people, that gives people a sense of, there's a future here. And lastly, a big thing is around compensation. And, we do a lot of work just to make sure that, the opportunities that are presented to our lawyers, everyone should have an equal opportunity, and not, the people that hang around the same country club, or some of the people that have some of the same interests. And, naturally, people they all graduate law school. They all come, into the profession, wanting to work hard, eager to, to succeed. But as you see, as careers start to stretch out, that there starts to be a disparity, whether it's by gender or by ethnicity, diversity, sexual orientation, and ultimately that comes from just the opportunities. And are people given the right opportunities, or given the mentorship opportunities to be trained and learned how to do all those things? So a little bit, it's very having to be very intentional around these topics, and not just kind of the natural way, natural or Darwinianism or something like that. Because the fact of the matter is that just we're, as humans, we tend to gravitate around things that we feel comfortable with. And so we tend to gravitate around people that we feel comfortable with. So a big saying in the diversity circles is you need to become comfortable being uncomfortable, because that ultimately will lead to more success in creating the culture that you want to foster more diverse and inclusive environments.
I love that statement. Be comfortable being uncomfortable. You mentioned recently in a podcast of yours, you have a podcast, Inclusivity Included.
Yeah, that Inclusivity Included, powerful personal stories. So thanks for the plug.
Yeah,
Just look it up on Google.
it's a
Or
fantastic podcast. But recently, one of the things you were mentioning, because right now, we're in a period of the 2020 quarantine, and it's a time of tough communication. And one of the things, if you can elaborate a little bit around how leaders can make sure that everyone is feeling like they are a part of the team.
Well, yeah, we're just it's just such a tragedy. It's so just when you listen to the news or you see the reports of just how people are suffering so much, and I guess the one thing that I think a lot of leaders hopefully understand is that one size does not fit all. One solution does not work for everyone, and so just that's the whole concept of inclusivity and valuing diversity, is understanding that people react differently to things. People are in different situations. There's a lot of variety in terms of what's going on right now. And I just, for example, this may not be particular to the law firm setting specifically, but here in Los Angeles, for example, we all have to wear masks whenever we go out in public. I saw that Beverly Hills is requiring that even if you go on a walk, in your neighborhood, you're required to wear a mask. Well, you've seen some of the reports is that that's tough actually for some people. I was talking to a colleague that from back east. She said that in Camden, New Jersey, for example, before we all went on into lockdown, they would refuse to in restaurants would refuse to serve customers that wore a mask. And so just the stigma around wearing a mask is tough for people. Example here in Los Angeles is the gangs. There's the classic Bloods and the Crips who are red and black. And so, you have to just think of it. Are you going to wear a red bandana? And what does that mean? And so there's a lot of sensitivity around that. I just was on a podcast, on a webinar yesterday for the National Organizations for Disability. We're talking about some of the challenges that some of the disabled folks have. And one of them was that I think it was Target. It's really sensitive to their employees that are hearing impaired or deaf. And so those that rely on lip reading. And so if you're a cashier or someone like that in a store, and if you're having to wear a mask and your customers are wearing masks, how are you going to understand what they're saying, right? So you have to be very sensitive to people's individual circumstances. So a lot that leaders can do to be inclusive. I think the fundamental point that I like to make is that that the D&I response, or the D&I offices and organizations, or the people that really care about inclusion, have to be part of the decision making in terms of your response. I saw a recent article or something along those lines from either it was Law360 or Law.com, and it talked about responses that law firms need to do in terms of responding to the pandemic. And it have all the things that you would kind of expect is HR, insurance policies, financial, monitoring your financial condition, and all the like. But what I was really disappointed was that there wasn't anything in there in terms of the role of diversity and inclusion. And so I thought it was very short-sighted for the article not to really talk about the value of diversity and inclusion. It did talk about talent and morale and retention of talent, but not in the context of the importance of diversity and inclusion. And as I said, so I was a little disappointed to see that, because certainly as I've always preached in terms of the role of diversity and inclusion in organizations, is it has to be aligned with key goals of the organization. And when people in leadership can see the value and the role that diversity and inclusion plays in all your key goals, then it becomes a natural part of the planning process, or in this case, the response to the crisis. So if you have your D&I leadership involved in some of the planning, then it hopefully ensures that the responses and the activities you're doing also has that lens, or also has that filter around, how is this impacting inclusivity, or how is this, making sure that we are inclusive and conscious of all of our diversity and all the responses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's right on point. And I think also one of the things that you mentioned in the podcast, a simple practical thing that, managers or leaders can do is to make sure, in times like this, that you're not just reaching out to those people that you already have a close relationship, or the phone calls that are easy, but also just making sure that every member of the team feels touched and communicated with. I thought that was really, really wise.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you can think of whether it's a law firm or an organization. It's natural. People have their go-to people, right? And so when the leaders kind of get together, they talk to their go-to people. But and at Reed Smith, I think our teams have been very good. I've heard a number of, whether it's practice groups or client teams, that the virtual meetings and the like that they've been having, they're really intentionally tried to make sure that everyone is involved, and finding out how people are doing. Because as I said at the outset, people react differently to different situations, and some people are overwhelmed because they have small kids at home, or elderly parents that they're caring for, as well as trying to balance all their work assignments. On this call yesterday with the National Organization of Disability, we talked about parents with autistic kids, and the kids that normally are able to have a lot of special attention, special needs at school. Now that they're not in school, it's not like some other kids may do online learning. They may have some more challenges. So not only do these parents have to deal with their normal workload and the like, but they're also working with the child care or the elder care that they have to work with. On the other hand, you have people that are living by themselves and feeling very isolated. How do you make sure you're reaching out to them? Another thing I heard recently was that we're so much fans of these Zoom or virtual online calls and the rest, where we're seeing each other. Some people are introverted, and some people, frankly, don't want people inside their home, or people don't want to be seen in this way. So it's important to make sure that we're reaching those people, but maybe in a way that makes them feel comfortable and not pressured. We've seen a lot of these virtual copies or virtual happy hours, virtual meetups, and the question is this mandatory? Because as much as you want to reach people, some people may feel like I'm not really comfortable doing that. So it's important to try to reach everyone, but also be respectful and understanding their own situation as well.
Mm-hmm. Very good point. And I think that's a hallmark of good leadership, is the flexibility that one has to have in terms of their style, right? It's up to the leader to adapt to the style of those that they're working with.
No, absolutely right. It's the leaders that are able to know their team and engage their team, and have their team feel really a part, willing to follow that leader. And it's not from the playing favorites. It's not from the barking out orders, right? It's how to really engage people. So there's a really effective tool that as you know, I'm also a professional coach and executive coach, and coaching for leadership is to do not only an assessment of how you're doing, but you feel you're doing, but have your team around you do a 360 assessment of you. And so to have people point out your blind spots, and you may not realize that what you're doing. So it's those leaders that are willing to look at themselves and take a hard look at themselves are the ones that are always improving, which is always a great thing to have, a great quality.
Mm-hmm. In addition to coaching, I also do some recruiting. And I've noticed that with some, especially with smaller firms, sometimes a leader will, it's not just like race, sex, and, sexual preference, but a leader will sometimes want a carbon copy of themselves. They'll want a mini me, and a firm of mini me's. And looking at not only diversity in terms of kind of like those physical metrics, but also thinking about diversity in other ways, such as diversity of personality, diversity of strengths. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I'm sure everyone has seen all the literature and then the research about the power of diversity, right? And that the failures of organizations that don't embrace diversity, because diverse teams that are more diverse, that bring more diverse experiences, outlooks, backgrounds, have been proven to be more productive. Some of the classic examples you talk about is like Boeing, by having kind of a groupthink mentality, is why did the next 737s fail? And so kind of the autopsy of some of that is that they didn't have a team that was diverse enough to kind of point out some of the flaws that came out of that. So it's as simple as and the scientists will tell you that it's important to make sure you have diversity of thought and not groupthink, because where does innovation come from? It comes from people with different ideas and backgrounds, experiences, and if everybody is a clone of the leader, who's going to stand up to the leader and say, I don't think that's a good idea? Well, we all think it's a great idea. And you might just have this, again, huge blind spot, and not really, coming up with the best results or best outcomes for the organization. So, it goes back to the point that we said earlier, is that, people, if they just want to be around people that they feel is a good fit. It's a word we don't like using in the diversity circles or try to fight against, is the word fit, or the he reminds me of me when I was his age, is could be a fatal flaw, because that's that's really not going to result in true diverse thinking.
I love that story. That's wonderful. Well, it's such a treat to talk to you, John. Thank you so much for being on the show. Can you let our listeners know how to find you?
Oh, absolutely. So just go to reedsmith.com and you can just Google me. There's a number of ways to get in touch with me. I have a number of followers on LinkedIn, so we can connect that way. It's easy to get a hold of me. Brooke, I just wanted to leave your audience with just one thought that I've been telling our team a lot during this crisis, is that we will get through this, right? There will be a time when we'll be, quote, back to normal. I appreciate that culture might change a little bit. I may not be quick to shake someone's hand as quickly as I used to, but we will be back to normal at some point. And so the charge that I would give to everyone at this point is that, how will you be remembered? How will you and your organization be remembered when the dust settles, right? When we're all back to normal, and looking back at how you handled yourself and your organization during this crisis will be, remembered a long time after we get back. So here's an opportunity. We tell our folks at Reed Smith this all the time, is that when we're back to normal and people start to talk about what did Reed Smith do during that, and what did it embody in terms of our culture, because that hopefully will be a reputation that will live a lot longer than this virus. And so I really implore people to think about, as you're taking actions now. I appreciate there's going to be some difficult decisions that need to be made if we head into a recession and the like, but the way you treat people, the way you handle things, thinking inclusively as well. And if you talk about the importance and power of diversity, and you don't live it in times like these, then that's how you'll be remembered. But you also have an opportunity to be remembered in a very, very positive way.
Such a good point, John. And it reminds me of a few leaders I've spoken to at smaller firms that have faced tough, difficult financial decisions. And in thinking about the culture and, like you said, the way they want to be remembered, they decided to go to their teams and give them the choice of, do we all want to take a little bit of a cut and go through a little bit of a hard time here all together? Or do we want this all to be on one or two people? And everyone that's taken that thought and that theory to their team said we'd all like to suffer a little than have one person suffer a lot.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We're our team at Reed Smith. So we had exact same response. It's that we'll all take whether it's a freeze in salary or deferrals in some partner draws and the like. It's much better to do that than to have to make the cuts of losing some of the really great people that we have.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for being on the show, and to our listeners, thanks for listening. And please subscribe to the Law Life Coach podcast.
Yep.